Hey there YouTube, this is Kerry from Poetry, Texas with another video on my smoker. I've had a lot of comments asking about dimensions on the smoker, so this video is going to focus on the dimensions and why I did what I did when building the smoker. So let's get started. I just got back from a week-long mission trip and I was really hoping to move this smoker to its final resting place on a dedicated slab that I poured, but it's been so rainy and wet here, there's no way I can move it. Now, moving on to the smoker. So let's start with the Firebox. So the Firebox is 28 inches by 24 inches overall and 20 inches wide. It's a semi-insulated firebox, so the bottom is going to take away from those dimensions just a little bit. The bottom of the firebox is a remnant of the tank from when I cut the tank down from 150 gallon to 120 gallon. The actual firebox dimensions is 22 inches from the floor of the firebox to the top. From the door to the top of the firebox is right at 7 inches. That is important because as the air heats up and becomes lighter, less dense, and rises, I wanted to capture that air in the top of the firebox, which would create pressure and push the heat and smoke into the diffuser. My firebox door is right at 14 inches by 14 and a half. That was a strategic dimension because I wanted to be able to fit my chimney starter in there and dump it out when I have a load of hot charcoal. One other feature I forgot to mention on my earlier video was what I'm calling a windshield. It's this little flap on the side. Because my smoker is really heavy and it's going to be setting in a fixed position, I'm not going to be able to move it around depending upon how the wind's blowing. So I added this windshield. The windshield is positioned so that when the wind is blowing in a direction that would negatively affect my fire, I can swing it around and block the wind. When not in use, it pivots around and lays against the firebox and you never even really know it's there. There are the pivots. It's just a piece of 1/2 inch bar stock sticking in some 1/2 inch ID DOM tubing that's been welded to the box. I did create some detents in it, and there's a roll pin that drops into the detents to help hold it in place. When not in use, it just folds around against the firebox. There are my notches for the door. I created several notches so that I can have a lot of adjustability on how much air flows through the door crack into the firebox. Now let's talk about the diffuser. It is approximately 12 inches from the edge of the firebox to the back of the diffuser. My diffuser opening into the tank is about 16 inches. So I have about 4 inches of tank on each side of the diffuser to the edge of the tank. The diffuser and the collector both are 5 inches inside dimension, and they are centered up on the racks. So I have 2 inches above the racks and 2 inches below the racks for both the diffuser and the collector. Let's talk more about the diffuser. So this should be easier to see now that it is not in operation. So there's the inside of the diffuser. The throat opening is 48 inches, and I have a choke plate. That's what those two bolts sticking up are for. This is my choke plate. there's the choke plate in place. So I have the ability to reduce the throat opening all the way down to 28 square inches, or open it up to 48 square inches. I have some wing nuts that you can tighten down to hold it in place. Felden's calculator says for a conventional offset smoker, I need about 98 inches of throat opening. This smoker runs different than a conventional offset, so I'm working on my throat opening and growing it as needed based on testing. There was also some question about this bar that I added. This bar that I added is something that I was considering doing when I originally built the smoker, but I didn't. So I went back and added it. It's just a piece of 1/2-inch bar stock that's welded to the top of the diffuser opening. What it's meant to do is going to create a low pressure area on the cook chamber side of the bar, which should help the heat and smoke to come out of the diffuser and move up. I learned on my last test that this smoker seems to like 12-inch splits. I have more testing to do with different size splits to see what works best, but I had some 12-inch splits laying around. It seemed like one of those about every 40 minutes seemed to maintain a temp of 250 pretty well. Here's a look at the collector side of my smoker. Again, it's 5 inches inside dimension, and it's centered up on the grates. So I've got 2 inches above the grate, 2 inches below the grate. From watching Aaron Franklin videos and other pit builder videos, that seemed like the smartest size to make my collector and my diffuser. Another cool thing is my probe port. Most people use a cable gland, and it seems like you have to take it apart to get your temperature probes through. My probe port is a 3/4 rigid compression connector. The opening in the nut is just over 1 inch. You can take the ferrule out and throw it away. Then you have a 3/4 inch fitting that has a 1 inch opening on the nut. You can buy one of these Lava Lock probe ports on Amazon for $6.99, and now you have a really nice probe port that you can readily just shove your probes through. Moving on to my folding counterweight. This was just a series of trial and error to figure out the dimensions of the arms and the setback. Here is a really good look at the folding counterweight. It's made out of 1.5 inch by 1/4 inch bar stock. This was a lot of trial and error to figure out how big to make it and where to put the hinge points. Mine is approximately 4 inches from the pivot point back, and this is 17 inches. This is something you'll have to try on your own to figure out. I do recommend C-clamps, vice grips, and scrap iron to figure it out. From the hinge point of the door to the center of the counterweight is about 4 inches. That's what worked good for me. I can tell you that counterweight is pretty heavy. It did make it easy to find just the right amount of counterweight, since there are 3 pieces of pipe that fit inside of one another for my counterweight. I was able to add until I got the weight just where I wanted it. The door does have a little bit of weight to it when closed, and the counterweight is enough that I don't have to worry about the door accidentally shutting on me. One thing I did was put this piece of 1 inch angle iron across it so that the counterweight would rest on the handle when folded down. My door is sealed on all sides. I didn't want to take any chances on leaking air interfering with the airflow through the cooker. So I actually sealed the door on all sides. Moving on to the collector. My collector is 5 inches inside dimensions in height. It's centered up on the grates. It's about 16 inches across, leaving about 4 inches from the collector to the edge of the tank. I kept the collector close to the tank There's only about 2.5 inches between the stack and the tank. I didn't want to waste a bunch of heat with a long collector. Basically, I wanted to preserve as much heat as possible to help create draw out of my stack. The stack is 4 5/8 ID pipe. It's 3/16 wall. From the collector, from the top of the collector to the top of the stack is right at 43 inches. I know there are some people that say your important dimension is from the top of the cook chamber to the top of the stack. The air inside the stack is at a lower density than the air outside the stack. That's what creates draw. So that's what I focused on. Again, 43 inches up, 4 5/8 ID. Right now, this stack will outdraw my throat opening from the firebox to the cook chamber. I have to choke back the stack to even out the temperatures. I am going to do a cook on it today. I'm going to cook some ribs and a chuck roast. I will post some video of the cook. I have cooked a smoked meatloaf on this thing. It did great. It does cook very gentle. I'm used to cooking on a highly modded Weber Smoky Mountain cooker, which cooks much more aggressively than this. So there it is. I hope this has helped you out with your smoker builds. If you got any other questions, just post them in the comment. Thanks for watching.